Addiction means never getting enough of what you no longer really want. Problem gambling, known as ludomania, is an urge to gamble despite being aware of the negative consequences and a desire to stop. It's been called the crack cocaine without the chemicals. And it is a problem not only with addiction, but also impulse control, and such a damaging one. Now, the ABCs of gambling are addiction, bankruptcy, and crime. And this exacts a horrific toll, not only on our community, but also our personal, emotional, and mental health. The problem is Canada has rapidly continued to increase with the gambling problem. It is a tax on the poor and those who are poor at math. The problem is also starting at earlier ages. Children as young as 9 years of age are online, computer gambling, and when you're young, you don't have the abilities to deal with addictions as you do when you're older. The consequences of that is gambling addiction, like no other addiction, leads to problems like suicide and depression. In fact, at a recent Gamblers Anonymous, 100% of those there had said that they can seriously considered suicide. They also have multiple addicts. They tend to have other problems. 40% of all compulsive gamblers are also abusing alcohol, because substance abuse and substitute of addictions is a common phenomena amongst those who have a problem with dopamine. And dopamine is that feel-good neurotransmitter that we have in our minds and our brains that rewards us. It's the central focus of the brain's reward system. And what it does is it allows us to feel good about things. When we eat, we have a release of dopamine. For me, when you slap a Rob Seeley in the head, that's a release of dopamine. It feels just good to do. The problem with gamblers is that their dopamine neurons don't work the same way as non-gamblers do. And that sort of leads us to a chance to treat them. We focus on the dopamine and try and reduce the exposure to dopamine, but what happens sometimes is that by wiping out the dopamine, you wipe out all the pleasure, so you're no longer gambling, but life sucks. Those with Parkinson's disease, interestingly enough, take medications to give them more dopamine, and so, in fact, people with Parkinson's can actually have a problem with gambling, as well as hypersexuality and a shopping addiction. So be aware of that. Now, casinos. Casinos are those windowless, soulless places where addicts becomes eventually a central focus of their lives. The time and energy and money spent in a casino could well be spent at learning and teaching and productive member society and gardening and watching Wisequacks and doing things that are better. Reading The Doctor is insane. But compulsive gambling grew enormously in the 60s because of the introduction of lotteries. Now, these public taxes on the poor, also on hopelessness, it reminds me of the movie starring Jim Carrey, when he said to a gal once, says, "What are my chances of you and I going out?" And she said, 1 in a billion, to which he said, "So you're telling me I have a chance?" That movie was from that line was from the movie Dumb and Dumber. And so I would tell you that a society where we have gambling and hopelessness and casinos and pawn shops is not one I don't think you want to raise your kids in. I may be wrong, but if I am, I'll bet you $20.